The night they burned my father's fishing cabin to the ground, the whole lake smelled like gasoline and wet pine, and I remember standing there barefoot in the mud thinking one very simple thing. Somebody in this town had finally lost their damn mind. What I didn't know yet was that the woman responsible wasn't just some angry HOA president with too much Botox and too little empathy. She was tied to a land deal worth nearly $40 million. And by the time I uncovered the truth, half the county council would be wearing orange jumpsuits on federal property. My name's Warren Bishop, and 3 years ago I came back to Blackwater Ridge, Tennessee, to bury my mother and disappear from the world for a while. Instead, I accidentally started a war. See, people hear retired federal prosecutor, and they imagine some polished guy in a Navy suit who spends weekends playing golf and boring everybody to death talking about taxes. That wasn't me. After 28 years putting corrupt politicians and organized fraud rings behind bars, I was tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. The kind of tired that settles in your bones. My wife, Ellie, used to say, I walked around carrying invisible bricks on my shoulders. After she passed, those bricks got heavier. So I came home. Blackwater Ridge sat tucked against the foothills like one of those forgotten Appalachian towns where time moves slower than everywhere else. My father built that fishing cabin beside Mercer Lake in 1974 with his own hands, cedar beams, stone fireplace, old iron roof that sang during rainstorms. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. Every inch of that place carried memories. My mother frying catfish while Merle Haggard played through a busted radio, my dad teaching me how to tie trout flies at the kitchen table, the smell of wood smoke drifting through winter air. Then came Silver Pines Estates. 800 luxury homes dropped on a farmland like somebody copy-pasted suburbia directly into the mountains. Big gray houses, white fences, fake southern charm. People from Atlanta pretending they suddenly love country living while filing complaints about crickets being too loud at night. And sitting right in the center of their perfect little development was my father's cabin. Technically, my land wasn't part of their HOA. Never had been. My father was smart enough to lock the property into protected lakefront conservation status decades earlier. Legally, the Silver Pines Property Association had exactly as much authority over me as they did over the governor's mansion. But nobody ever explained that to Celeste Holloway. Lord, that woman. If ambition and Chardonnay had a daughter, it'd be Celeste. Mid-50s, platinum blonde hair sprayed into permanent perfection, pearl earrings, white pantsuits that somehow looked expensive and hostile at the same time. Every sentence out of her mouth sounded like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. I first met her on a foggy October morning while I was fixing the dock behind the cabin. Water was rolling soft against the posts, loons calling out across the lake. I was halfway under the deck with a wrench in my hand when I heard heels crunching down the gravel path. Mr. Bishop, she called, sweet as poison tea. I certainly hope we can have a civilized conversation. I slid out from under the dock and looked up at her, standing there like she was posing for a real estate magazine. Behind her stood 2 HOA board members holding clipboards, both wearing nervous smiles. Depends, I said. Civilized about what? Her eyes drifted toward the cabin with visible disgust. Your property has become a concern for the community. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. My cabin's been here longer than your entire subdivision. That may be true, she replied, smile tightening, but progress requires adaptation. Several homeowners have complained that your structure negatively impacts property values. There was property values. Every HOA dictator's favorite religion. I leaned against the railing, wiping lake water off my hands. Ma'am, this cabin survived Nixon, Carter, 2 floods, and 1 black bear breaking through the kitchen window. I think it'll survive your complaints, too. One of the board members snorted, trying not to laugh. Celeste shot him a look sharp enough to skin a deer. Mr. Bishop, she said quietly now, communities function best when everyone cooperates. Refusing cooperation can create complications. And there it was beneath the polished voice. The threat. I'd spent almost 3 decades prosecuting mob-connected contractors and crooked county officials. You develop instincts after a while. Certain tones, certain pauses, certain smiles people use right before they try to ruin your life. I looked at her for a long moment, listening to the wind moving through the trees. Then I said, "You should be careful with words like complications. Sometimes they become evidence." For the first time, her smile disappeared completely. And standing there beside Mercer Lake, with cold mountain air blowing across the water, I realized this wasn't about a cabin at all. It was about land, power, and a woman who wasn't used to hearing the word no. The first official complaint showed up 4 days later, taped to my front door in a plastic sleeve like some kind of passive-aggressive death warrant. "A no seréis de exterior de tiración." That was the phrase they used. Apparently weathered cedar and 50 years of mountain rain now counted as a threat to civilization. I stood there reading it while sunlight spilled through the trees, and somewhere across the lake a kid was laughing from a kayak. And I remember thinking, these people really moved into Tennessee and declared war on wood. I would have ignored it too, honestly, except 2 days later the county inspection office showed up. That caught my attention. A skinny code enforcement officer named Trevor Mills climbed out of a county truck looking like he'd rather be attacked by wolves than knock on my door. Poor guy couldn't have been older than 30. He kept adjusting his tie like it was choking him. "Mr. Bishop," he said carefully, "we received multiple complaints regarding unsafe structures and environmental violations." I took a sip of coffee and looked past him toward the lake. "What kind of environmental violations?" He flipped through paperwork with sweaty hands. "Potential fuel leakage into protected waters, improper dock stabilization, unlicensed shoreline modifications." I stared at him for a second. Then I pointed toward the cabin. "Trevor, that dock was approved by the Tennessee Wildlife Commission in 1981. Hell, I still know the ranger who signed the permit. He's probably 90 now, but he's alive." The kid visibly swallowed. "Look, off the record," he muttered quietly. "This came from higher up." "How high?" He glanced toward the road before lowering his voice even more. "County Development Office. They said this property's becoming problematic." Problematic. That's a funny word when politicians use it. Doesn't mean dangerous. Doesn't mean illegal. It means expensive people. "You don't scare me." That actually rattled her for a second. Then came the smile again. That polished fake smile wealthy people use right before they destroy somebody's livelihood. "Mr. Bishop, Warren, do you know how much investment is flowing into this county right now? Families, tourism, jobs, growth. Greed sounds prettier when you call it growth, doesn't it?" Her eyes narrowed behind the sunglasses. "We offered you nearly double market value for this property. You offered me hush money to erase my father." The wind moved through the trees between us. Somewhere down the hill, water slapped softly against the dock. And for one brief moment, I think she realized I wasn't bluffing, wasn't intimidated, wasn't exhausted enough to roll over the way most people eventually do. That frustrated her more than anger would have. "You really want to die on this hill?" she asked quietly. I looked past her toward Mercer Lake shining silver beneath the clouds. "My daddy already did." That ended the conversation, or at least I thought it did. 3 nights later the power went out. Now, losing electricity in the mountains isn't unusual. Storms happen. Trees fall. But what made my skin crawl was the timing. Every outage happened after midnight, always during heavy rain, always affecting only my property. Then my internet got cut. Then somebody reported illegal septic contamination. Then anonymous Facebook posts started appearing in local groups calling me unstable, violent, dangerous. One post claimed I'd threatened HOA residents with firearms. Another claimed federal prosecutors forced me into early retirement after mental decline. That one almost made me laugh. You know what the ugly truth about small-town corruption is? It rarely starts with murder or arson or giant cinematic crimes. It starts with whispers, tiny little lies repeated often enough that decent people stop questioning them. And Celeste was good at whispers. Real good. Within 2 weeks, people at the grocery store stopped making eye contact with me. Waitresses got quieter around my table. Folks I'd known since childhood suddenly looked nervous standing too close to my truck. Except for one person. Her name was Elena Ruiz. 34, single mother, emergency room nurse over at Blackwater Medical Center. I met her because somebody from the HOA had fined her $400 for hanging Puerto Rican flags beside American ones on her front porch. Apparently, cultural displays violated neighborhood harmony standards. Jesus Christ. Elena showed up at my cabin one evening carrying a folder full of violation notices and enough frustration to power Nashville. You know what these people do? She said while pacing my kitchen. They target anybody who can't afford lawyers. Elderly people, immigrants, widows, they just bleed them slowly. I sat there listening while rain tapped against the windows. And somewhere during that conversation, something shifted inside me. Because until then, this had still been personal. My cabin, my land, my memories. But Elena kept talking about families getting pushed out, veterans getting fined over flags, retirees losing homes after endless legal fees, and suddenly I recognized the pattern. It was racketeering. Clean suburban racketeering wrapped in HOA paperwork and county permits. Same predator. Different costume. That's when I called Marcus Kane. Marcus had been one of my investigators back in Chicago before leaving federal service for private litigation work. Meanest civil fraud attorney I'd ever met. 6'4" former Marine who treated corrupt officials the way wolves treat injured deer. He answered on the second ring. Warren, he said, you sound pissed. I think I accidentally found organized crime in a gated community. Silence. Then Marcus laughed. Now, that's the kind of retirement story I like. The following week, he drove into Blackwater Ridge, carrying 3 suitcases, 2 laptops, and enough legal caffeine to kill a horse. And that same night, while we were reviewing county financial records at my kitchen table, Marcus suddenly looked up from his screen and said 4 words that changed everything. Oh, you've got corruption. Not maybe, not probably. You've got corruption. Then he slowly turned the laptop toward me. And sitting there in black and white financial records was proof that Silver Pines wasn't just buying land. They were bribing county officials to seize it. For a long time after Ellie died, I honestly believed anger had burned itself out of me. Grief does that sometimes. It hollows you clean. But sitting there beside Marcus at 2 in the morning, staring at bank transfers connecting Silver Pines developers to county commissioners, I felt something wake back up inside my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not rage exactly. Rage is messy. This was colder than that. Sharper. The kind of calm you get right before a courtroom verdict destroys somebody's entire future. Marcus leaned back in the chair, rubbing his jaw. Warren, these idiots have been using county code enforcement to drive down property values before forced acquisitions. I looked again at the screen. Shell companies. Fake environmental citations. Emergency zoning actions. Every single lakefront property owner who resisted selling eventually got buried under inspections, lawsuits, or tax reassessments until they folded. Except me, because Celeste Holloway made one catastrophic mistake. She picked a fight with somebody who knew how federal conspiracy cases work from the inside out. The next 48 hours moved fast. Marcus contacted 2 former Justice Department analysts he trusted. Elena started quietly collecting testimony from residents inside Silver Pines. And I began documenting everything. Every violation notice, every suspicious county visit, every threatening voicemail Celeste ever left. Turns out wealthy narcissists love hearing themselves talk. By Friday afternoon, we had enough evidence to trigger preliminary federal interest. And that should have scared Celeste. But corrupt people always believe they're smarter than consequences. That's what destroys them in the end. The fire started 3 nights later. I woke up around 3:11 a.m. because the bedroom smelled wrong. Not campfire smoke, not chimney smoke, gasoline, thick and chemical and ugly. Then came the sound. Wood cracking. I stepped onto the porch and saw flames climbing through my father's cabin windows like something alive, trying to escape. Orange light exploded across Mercer Lake, reflecting against black water while cedar beams popped under the heat. For 1 second, one horrible second, I just stood there frozen, because that cabin wasn't lumber. It was my mother's laughter in the kitchen, my father's old fishing jacket hanging beside the door. Christmas mornings, birthday dinners, rainstorms, memories. And now it was burning like somebody trying to erase a family from history. I grabbed the hose, knowing it was useless. Heat rolled across the yard hard enough to sting my skin. Neighbors started gathering near the road, silhouettes in pajamas under flashing fire truck lights. Then I saw her, Celeste, standing beside her white Mercedes at the edge of the crowd, wearing a cream-colored coat, arms folded calmly, like she was attending theater. Watching. That was the moment she lost. Not legally, spiritually, because decent people don't watch a man's family history burn with satisfaction in their eyes. I walked toward her through smoke and ash until we stood maybe 6 feet apart. She didn't flinch. Terrible accident, she said softly. I could hear sirens echoing off the mountains behind us. You know, I replied, voice calm enough to scare even myself. I've spent most of my life watching arrogant people mistake power for invincibility. That smile touched her mouth again. Warren, sometimes old things disappear. That's how progress works. Behind me, the roof collapsed inward with a roar of sparks. And weirdly, that sound brought me peace. Because suddenly I understood exactly what this was. Not a property dispute. Not HOA drama. Predators. People who destroyed lives because nobody had ever stopped them before. Celeste tilted her head slightly. You should have taken the offer. I looked at the fire one last time. Then back at her. Ma'am, I said quietly, you just committed federal arson against the home of a former United States prosecutor while standing under 3 security cameras. The color drained from her face so fast, it was almost impressive. See, what Celeste didn't know was Marcus installed motion surveillance around the property 2 days earlier after spotting unusual activity near the lake road. Crystal clear infrared footage, license plates, timestamps, everything, and suddenly the confidence vanished from her eyes. By sunrise, the FBI had the footage. By noon, federal investigators subpoenaed county financial records. By Monday morning, 3 county officials resigned unexpectedly. And by Wednesday night, the entire town exploded. News vans lined Main Street. Reporters crowded the courthouse. Rumors spread faster than wildfire through Blackwater Ridge. Secret recordings surfaced. Bribe payments surfaced. Offshore accounts surfaced. Turns out corruption leaks like poison once the pressure cracks. The final collapse happened during the Silver Pines HOA board meeting. Packed room. Residents furious. Cameras everywhere. Celeste stood at the podium trying to maintain control while federal agents quietly filled the back wall. I remember she kept smoothing her blazer over and over because her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then Agent Naomi Keller stepped forward holding a warrant folder. The whole room went dead silent. Celeste Holloway, she said clearly, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, bribery, witness intimidation, and federal arson. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And for the first time since I'd met her, Celeste Holloway looked small. Not powerful. Not elegant. Just small. As agents cuffed her hands, somebody in the back of the room started clapping. Then another person joined. Then another. Not because people enjoy destruction. Because people get tired of being afraid. 6 months later, volunteers rebuilt my father's cabin using salvaged stone from the original fireplace. Elena helped organize fundraisers. Marcus still jokes that Blackwater Ridge became the only town in America where HOA meetings now require ethics lawyers present. And me? Well, I stayed. Turns out grief feels lighter when you're building something instead of burying it. But I'll tell you something honest before we end this story. Celeste didn't create corruption in Blackwater Ridge. She just exposed how many people were willing to participate in it as long as money stayed flowing and nobody pushed back. That's the dangerous part, not the villain, the silence around them. So now I want to ask you something, and I genuinely mean it. If somebody with power started quietly destroying your community, your neighbors, your family history, would you fight back? Or would you tell yourself it wasn't your problem yet? Because after everything that happened at Mercer Lake, I learned one thing for certain. Predators don't stop when they win. They stop when somebody finally makes them.